just stop me because I'll probably be on a roll. So stop me if you want to interject. But please, if everybody could throw your closing ratio in the chat, your closing ratio and the amount of months you've been selling. Closing ratio. Everybody on the call, put your closing ratio and the amount of months you've been selling. If you don't know it, figure it out after the call. But closing ratio and the amount of months you've been selling. And then if Claudia's on this call or somebody who might be able to go through and average up everybody's closing ratio and the average months, obviously separately. So I don't know who's on here that would be able to do something like that. Claudia, maybe Mindy, somebody. But somebody pay attention for that because I'd like to know that. I just kind of want to see where the level of Pinnacle is as a whole. All right, guys. So a minimum of 5 sales a week. I think that in all things, confused people don't buy. And if our process at Pinnacle is complicated, like the agents aren't going to buy in, right? So there's 2 things that I think you have to have, and I'm going to go in depth on everything that you text me about, Joe. And there's a few different categories, but really there's 2 things that matter. Number 1, you've got to have a good script, okay? And we're going to talk about this in depth. But like a lot of our teams, I know Mindy's got an amazing script, Jonah's got an amazing script, I've got my scripts that I use. What I'm looking for in a script, is structure, right? Like it has to keep me along the process. I don't want a script that a client can pull me away from and get me off the script. So a script needs to flow nicely. A script also, and I think this is the most important thing, needs to pull all the objections out before they come out. So for my new agents, I make sure all my scripts have built in every single objection, almost every objection that you could get, and how to pull it out. So those are the 2 things that I'm looking for. So you've got to stay consistent with the script that you're using, and you've got to say the same thing all the time until you're, writing 20 to 30K a week or a month, excuse me. Once you're there, you can kind of develop something and make it your own. But until you're at a consistent 20 to 30K a month, use somebody's script who's been here longer and does better than you. The other number that matters, Joe, for the average agent, you have to show numbers to 15 people a week. 15, if you want at least 5 sales, 15 people a week, that puts you at a 33% closing ratio. I could take anybody, almost anybody on planet Earth, and I could have them with an above 33% closing ratio from day 1 if they're using my script and following my process. So we have to show numbers at least 15 people a week. So that looks like 3 to 5 a day. If you're booking appointments, that's probably 30 appointments booked a week to show numbers to 15. If you're 1 call closing, obviously you're presenting 3 to 5 people a day. So those are the 2 things that really matter. A, we got to have a script. B, you have to be talking to 15 people a week, showing numbers. So just to kind of lay out, and that's really the basis for everything that we're going to talk about here today. So the first thing that I think is super important, once you have a script and once you're, presenting numbers to people, those are the 2 most important things. So now here's where your skill set comes into play. Because if you're able to do those 2, you're going to close 5 people plus, like pretty easily. But I think the number 1 most important thing for agents, Joe, is tracking their numbers and understanding your business. So if you hopped on this call and I asked you to put your closing ratio in the chat and you don't know it like to the T, then shame on you for not caring enough about your business and your profitability to know how many people you close and what you can improve on. Because if I had an agent, Joe, the other day that called me. It was like, Ryan, I need help. Nobody's showing up to appointments. I was like, okay, well, pull up your numbers. Like, what are your numbers? And he's like, well, I don't know. Let me go figure them out. I was like, all right, call me back later. Click. I can't help. Like, I cannot. There's 2 things. Number 1, like I can't care about your business more than you do. If you track your numbers, how many people, how many dials you make, how many total contacts, how many appointments you book, presentations you give, and then closes, that's everything that you're going to need to tell you what to work on in your business. So like so many agents, Joe, like this is an emotional business. We're spending money on leads. Sales is already emotional. Now you add in, hey, we're spending our own money on leads. In order for us to really nail down our process and see what works, you have to have tracked your numbers. You should know everything. You should know your exact closing ratio, your exact booking ratio, your exact show ratio on your appointments. The reason that's important, Joe, is because it really helps take all the emotions out of it. Because when you're selling, especially as an emotional sale as we do, it's hard to take that away. And so many times I have agents who call me they think they have a problem because they had 4 or 5 people in a row that said no. They're like, Ryan, I can't close any young people. I've had 5 young people today, and all of them said no. Which, by the way, I had 4 the other day, and all of them said no. So it happens. But like, I had 5 young people today. All of them said no. I'm like, all right, let's look at your numbers. We look at their numbers. Their closing ratio was like 62% over the last 2 months. I'm like, dude, like, you're fine. Like, just keep doing what you're doing. Like, you don't have a problem. You're really, really, really good at selling. You just ran into a couple people in a row that wanted to say no. And sometimes we get so distracted by our thoughts and emotions. I try to do, self-improvement every week. And I heard a saying, and it was like a Buddhist monk that said this, and he's probably not the first person to say this, but he said, your thoughts and emotions are not you. Your thoughts and emotions are not you. And I'm here to tell you, in this business, like, the emotions that you have, they don't have to become you. Like, if you entertain them and you give them a place to stay in your brain, that's when they become you. So you've got to learn how to take your thoughts, your emotions. They're going to come into your head. They're going to happen. Like, you can't, but when they come, you've got to understand, okay, just because I feel like I'm doing terrible right now doesn't mean I'm doing terrible. Let me go back and look at my numbers and see what the numbers actually say. I also saw a study recently, Joe, which kind of blew my mind. So the center of your brain that makes decisions and the center of your brain that reasons why you made decisions are separate from each other. You would think they'd kind of be the same. They're separate. And the default setting for human beings is for the center of your brain that makes decisions. That's what fires first. So your brain makes a decision, and then the reasoning side of your brain tells you why, using the information, tells you why afterwards you made that decision. So the default setting for human beings is to make a decision and then give a reason why. So you've got to, A, be aware of that, and B, understand it doesn't have to be like that. Like, I can think through things. I can make a decision on my own first. And I felt like that really blew my mind when I understood, dude, that makes so much sense, because there's so many times where I do something, I don't really know why, and then I just kind of try to figure it out afterwards. But if you really take yourself out and you're like, hey, I got to make sure that I'm making good decisions, that, I'm thinking through my process before I become emotional about something. Let me think, is this worth being emotional about? And that's what the numbers helps with. Like, half the time, Joe, when agents call me, I had Johnny Gaeta, wouldn't mind me sharing this. He called me in December. He called me and one other guy in December. And he had just come off of like a 40K month. And he's like, dude, I'm doing terrible. I can't close. I'm like, well, what was your last month? He's like, I did like 40K. I'm like, okay, well, how many people are you sitting with a week? He was sitting with an average of 11 a week. I was like, dude, you're amazing. You sat with 40 people and closed 40K last month. Like, you're an amazing salesperson. Your problem is you need to be showing numbers to at least 15 to 20 a week. And like, most of the time, that's all that it is. So you need to track total dials, total contacts, total appointments booked, and closes. And those are the numbers that you need to know to understand your business. You should know that down to, like, when I'm setting a goal for myself, Joe, if I want to write 40K for the month, I don't just set a goal of 40K. I know each appointment that I book, how much is that worth? I did the math the other day. Every appointment that I run, Joe, I make about $722. Whether or not I sell it, whether or not they show up, whether or not they get on and they're dressed like a clown and they tell me to screw off, every appointment that I've run for the last 3 years is worth $722. And when I understand that, like, I don't care about that individual appointment. Like, I care about the person that I'm sitting with. But like, if the appointment doesn't show up, who cares? Next one up. Like, I know that, I just made $722, so who cares? And the way that you do that is you just take your average premium submitted divided by your average appointments ran, and that'll give you that number, what every appointment is worth. And you can track your business all the way down to dials. Every single dial that you make, I did the math. I make an average of about 85 dials a day. And every dial for me over the last 3 years has been worth about $22. Which is kind of crazy.
Wild.
So when you understand, like, even if it's $1 a dial, I'm like, bro, if you press this button, this little green call button, every time you press it, I'm going to give you a dial. You're going to be like, oh, is there a limit on how many times I can press it a day? And that's how you have to look at this business. Like, we get so attached to the results and the emotions. You have to fall in love with the activity. You can't conjure results. Like, you can't make results happen. You can't just create sales. But you can create activity. You can create conversations. You can pick up the phone and you can blitz the phone, and that's how you get those results to come. Does that make sense?
Ton of sense. Dude, you're killing it. Keep going.
So that's the first part. You have to understand your numbers. And I think that taking the emotions out of it is super important. A lot of us are super emotional. The second thing we got to talk about, Joe, is lead flow. So if you want to write at least five sales a week, you have to be spending at least $1,000 a week on leads. Sure, you can spend $300 to $500 and make 5 sales. Are you going to do it consistently though? No. You're going to have a week where you do 1 or 2, and the next week you do 5, and the next week is 3, the next week is 8. What we're looking for is consistency in our process, right? Like we have to have consistency so we can have consistent results. On top of that, if you spend $300 to $500, it's going to take you significantly longer to write that same 5 policies than it would to spend 1,000. I think most of us on this call have the understanding of the big picture of where we're at. I don't think most of us want to just write business for the rest of our lives. We understand if you want to build an agency, eventually you've got to start spending more on leads to buy some time back so you actually have some time to recruit, mentor, teach agents, and build. So spend at least $1,000 a week. In my mind, I want my agents spending at least $1,250 if they're going to write 5 policies a week. It has to be fresh leads at least once a week. At least once a week, you have to have fresh leads. A lot of new agents, Joe, they come in with the mentality of, oh, well, I didn't make what I wanted to last week, or I didn't sell anything last week, so I'm going to try to rework these leads. Well, just think about it. They didn't make that much money last week. So money's tight. So they're going to take those same leads, try to rework them. Do you think they're going to make more money that second week or less money?
Nope. They're going to make less money.
They're going to make less money. And then after that week, you're going to be in an even worse financial spot, and you're going to have to try to do the same thing. So not buying leads every week is like if you have a restaurant and one week you don't make that much money. So the grocery truck comes around Sunday morning. You're like, hey, Joe, I don't want no groceries. Like, we didn't make that much money. Don't give me any groceries. And then you open up Monday. People come in. They try to order. You're like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't have any food. Like, I can't, I didn't buy any groceries. You just completely limited your ability to pull yourself out of that hole. And so I understand, like, we don't always have infinite money to spend on leads, but you have to have some fresh leads coming in. Like, you absolutely have to. Let me look at the chat.
I think Colin Mothersoul has a question. Colin, you could ask it real fast.
How you doing, Ryan?
Pretty good, brother. What's up?
Hey, so I know or a lot of my agents anyway, like they come on, they don't have much money. So with that, do you normally, you just tell them buy fresh leads off the bat, or do you have them work their way up from the age, tier 3 leads?
Yeah, I'm starting with aged anywhere from 2 years, from 3 to 6 months, all the way back to 2 years. That's kind of the sweet spot. Where I feel like it doesn't drive you mad if you have to do that for forever, right? You can dial older leads. But that I'm almost always starting people there anyway. I'm not having people buy $25 and $50 leads off the bat unless they have a lot of sales experience coming in.
Ryan, at what point, I'll ask a follow-up. Good question, Colin. At what point, Ryan, are you wanting that agent to start to transition some of their lead money, reallocate that towards fresh leads?
Yeah, I think that for the average, and this is a little bit different for everybody, but I think once you have $10,000 in your business bank account, once you have $10,000 more than you started, so if you started with $2,000 when you bought leads, and now you have $12,000, all right, cool, now let's allocating some extra money. And that's where being in touch with your agents, knowing how much they're getting deposited, and is their business trending up or down, that's where that kind of, you get that understanding from. But once you have at least $10,000, I'm trying to get us onto some fresh leads to buy back some time.
Makes sense. Keep going.
Yeah. All right. And then, okay.
Don't worry about that right now. We got too much to cover, right?
All right, cool. Yeah, if there's someone that wants that if there's a question you want answered, you can let me know. Schedule. Let's go to schedule, because that's lead flow. You have to have fresh leads coming in. I once you're consistent, you're at 20K once or twice, I like spending a little bit more on some leads to buy back some time. Schedule. Guys, in most of everything that we're going to do, if we're building a wall, if trying to sell 5 policies a week is building a wall, and every concept, everything we're doing is a brick on the wall, consistency is the mortar between the bricks that's going to hold everything together. Okay? So in everything that we do, we have to have consistency. It doesn't matter what you're trying to get great at in life, if it's sports, working out, sales. If you're not consistent with it, you'll always be average or below average, always. You can count on it. But the people that rise above, they're not usually the smartest. They're not usually the most talented. They're the most consistent.
Yep.
They're the people that have been around the longest. They've done the same things the same way all the time. And so everything that we do, we have to have consistency. So if you don't have a consistent schedule, it's going to be very, very difficult to overcome what you need to overcome. So, and that's one of the reasons. I mean, I like on paper, like one call closing to me makes a lot more sense. That's one of the reasons, though, for myself that like, okay, if I have a schedule that I like running appointments for myself, is just because I know I have 2 blitz days a week. And by a blitz day, I mean I have 8 hours a week where I lock in and focus. I turn the distractions off on my phone. Do not disturb goes on Monday morning from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. and Thursday morning from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. And what I do in those 8 hours, I'm able to book my 30 to 40 appointments for the entire week, Joe. I lock in, I just sit at my desk and I just pound the phones. And then I don't have to dial again. I don't have to dial to Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday. If I want to, I will. If I want some time off, I'll run some extra appointments and earn that time off. But you have to have that schedule. And to me, like I feel like everybody needs to have blitz days where you get most of your work done. It needs to be early in the week and early in the day. You only have so much willpower, like they've done studies on this. Your ability to make good decisions first thing in the morning versus late at night, it's drastically reduced throughout the day. So the most difficult things that you need to do, you've got to do them right there at the beginning of the day. It gets more and more difficult. And on top of that, Joe, if I don't start booking appointments till 10, 11 a.m. and I want to book 20, well, now I'm going to be stressed out because I'm going to be behind. And now I'm going to have that commission breath. And what that's going to do is it's going to cause me to book fewer appointments or sell less insurance. And that in turn, I'm going to be more stressed out and it's going to create more commission breath. So you've got to do everything that you can to relieve any type of stress that you could, because this is a very stressful business. We're spending money on leads. It can be very stressful. Everything you can do to relieve stress, like you've got to do it as early as possible. So first thing in the morning, I run appointments for some people that ask in the chat. I'll run appointments in the afternoons, evenings. It's not that I don't like call anybody. It's just I dial and I book appointments, and then I run those appointments in the evenings or on Tuesday. I personally wake up at like between 6 and 6:30, and then I try to hit the office on those days by 7:30 if I can. And that's what I did for a long time. Nowadays, I don't have to run as many appointments because, I was consistent for 2.5, 3 years. So nowadays I don't have to hit the phones at 7, but for a long time, that's what I did. So that schedule, I think you need to have in your schedule, you need to know what are your non-negotiables, right? So my non-negotiable was always 40 appointments a week, or actually my non-negotiable was 160 appointments a month. So that way, if I want to move my week around to where this week I'll run 50, next week I'll run 50, the next week I'll only run 20 because I'm off half the week, and then the next week I'll run 40. That was my non-negotiable. So what are your non-negotiables? If you're one call closing, it's all just about presentations. So me saying I run 40 appointments is basically like me doing 20, maybe 25 one call closes a week. It equates to about the same thing. So you need to know your non-negotiables and make sure you have the time to hit those. So always early in the week for me, it was 40 appointments. Let's talk about tone for a second here. So what I'm doing on this call right now, guys, I'm talking a million miles a minute. We definitely don't want to do that. That's the opposite, okay? So we want to be low and slow and in control is how I like to think about it. Low and slow and in control. If you ever think about somebody who's out of control, like if you watch like a boxing match and somebody who's out of control, they're like moving around sporadically, they're just throwing their arms around, they don't look in control. Well, your guys we're on the phone, so they can't see your body language. So your voice, your tone is that. That's how they tell, is this person in control or are they not? So you got to speak low. Don't have like a high, nice pitch that first of all, it's annoying. Like record yourself if you're doing that. It's very, very annoying. People won't want to listen to you. But low, nice and slow. And then you've got to end every sentence on a down tone where you're moving the sentence, dropping it off. The natural thing to do is to go up at the end, especially when we're doing sales, we're doing something new, we'll drop everything up. And that is, it's needy. It sounds really annoying. It's salesy. And if you're dealing with objections, it's very like confrontational. Like that's what you do when you're being combative. Like you make the end pointed and sharp, and that's how you get that argumentative vibe. So whenever, especially, and I make sure it's super important, especially when someone's giving you objections and you're dealing with them, you've got to have that slow, relaxed, very disarming tone about you. So if Joe says, Ryan, do I have to make a decision today? Yep. Like I said, it's not open enrollment, so just need a simple yes or no from you. And then I'm dropping that off at the end. And that's the most important thing when you're dealing with objections, because if your tone gets at all hostile, they're already feeling defensive. So if they sense any kind of like offensive tactics from you, they will just shut down. So your tone is so important throughout the whole process, but especially like we do a really good job when we're dialing the phones. But a lot of times we don't talk about like your tone when you're dealing with the objections, and that to me is when it's the most important, is when you're dealing with any objections. So low and slow in control, and everything on a down tone, or you're dropping it off at the end. Did anybody add up what the closing ratio is amongst Pinnacle? If somebody didn't, Joe, maybe you can run through and do that. I'm just curious to see what it is, what the average closing ratio is.
Not enough people responded.
Okay, well, we'll get a decent idea. And honestly, it's Monday afternoon. Mindy said maybe like 35, which to me is bad because I think you should be at least at 45 or 50. So at Pinnacle wide, if it is 35, we have a lot to work on. Okay, we talked about most of that stuff. Let's go over to the script. Talking about the script. So everybody on this call, if you're not a top producer, if you're not writing 30 to 40K a week and you're not using the script, you are actively hurting yourself. You're actively losing money. So make sure you're using a script. The reason that's important, especially Joe, for new agents, is because Joe, is it usually like one or two big things that cause an agent to lose a sale, or is it like 100 little things?
Always the small things.
It's always the small things. And we always make the mistake, Joe. A lot of times we train, we'll train on the big things, how to deal with objections and rebuttals, how to close at the end. And we'll train on these big things. But most agents that I listen to that are struggling, I did 4 role plays in the last 2 weeks with agents where they didn't do a single big thing wrong. Every big thing that we think about, they did all of it right. But every single one of them did a bunch of small things very wrong. And there was one of them that I was working with. I was able to listen to him. This was the first time I was able to listen to him sell. I helped him tweak 1 or 2 small things on the phone. And it was small word chalks, and I'll walk you guys through what I'm talking about. And then he goes out and he closes his very next sale, which happened to be his first sale. And it's always those small things that matter. Because when you're building a wall, every brick needs to be strong, every piece. It's only as strong as the weakest link, right? So if those small things you do are super weak, then it's going to hurt you. So let's talk about some, and I'll send my script out to everybody that I use. I have one for normal mortgage leads, mortgage mailers, and then I have one for Facebook and StrongPoint. Most of everything is the same. Can you guys still hear me and see me? All I can see is John.
We got you.
All right, just making sure. Let's talk about a couple things that you can't do. When you're anytime, you can't say can or could. So I'll hear a lot of agents when they're trying to book an appointment, they're like, okay, so what we can do is, or when they're closing the sale and someone's saying, I want to think about it, they'll say, okay, Joe, so what we can do is we can start at the bottom and then bump it up later. Well, that can means you also could not. Or if you say can or could, it means if you plant that seed of doubt, that's what's going to come up and bite you at the end. So you have to speak definitively, and in absolutes. You cannot leave any room for doubt. If you leave room for doubt, the doubt will be there. So not we can do. So what we will do, Joe, what people do is we'll start at the bottom, and then after a week, a month, a year, whenever you've had plenty of time to think about it, we'll go ahead and bump it up at that point. All right? So you have to eliminate that. That's extremely important. I think the biggest thing, one of the biggest things that we do wrong a lot, and oh my goodness, almost every new agent I hear does this, and it's so important, but you have to understand, it's not your job to sell people. It's not. You can't convince anybody to buy anything. Like, you just can't. And every new agent coming in, and myself included, we all think we got to convince these people to buy. And there's a couple common word tracks that I hear that are like red flags to me that I know an agent is thinking, I have to convince this person to sell or to buy. But what you have to do is you have to ask good questions and they convince themselves to buy. Joe, this is something I heard from you, and it's so true. But what you say as a salesperson is suspect. What the client says is gold. They know you're a salesperson. And what you say, like normally, I mean, most of us probably don't trust what a lot of people say. Now, imagine you're sitting in front of a salesperson who's trying to get you to buy something. Well, your level of distrust is going to go up infinitely. So we can't say anything to them to make them buy. So we had to ask good questions. So a lot of agents out here using word tracks like, Joe, so we just want to make sure that if something happens to you, the home is paid off. Or Joe, the goal is to make sure if something happens to you, the home is paid off. Anytime you're like, when you're using those word tracks that are lumping yourself in with the client, that to me says, okay, put a pause on it. You got to make sure you ask them that first. Is that something they wanted? If that's something that they explicitly stated to you that they wanted, then you can do that. But if they haven't explicitly stated that, then you can't do that. So, Joe, you have to, instead of saying, hey, Joe, you want to make sure when you die the home is paid off for your family, right? Asking a leading question and painting them into a corner and only allowing them to give one response. You have to just ask a genuine question. Let them respond however they want. So, Joe, if you die tomorrow, do you want to make sure the home is paid off for your wife? Joe can say yes. Joe can say no. If Joe says no and he doesn't care, good. I'm like, all right, cool. Have a great day, Joe. Let me go find somebody who actually wants my help. And if you get a fake response out of somebody because you said, Joe, you want to make sure if something happens to you, the home's paid off for your wife, right? And he says yes because you kind of made him look like an idiot if he didn't say yes. You got a fake answer. Well, now you're going to spend the next 15, 20 minutes with a guy who's just going to tell you no at the end anyway. So you're not helping yourself. You're hurting yourself. You're wasting your time. So make sure you are just asking questions in a way that allows them to respond genuinely. And if you hear yourself saying, Joe, we want to make sure, or Joe, our goal is to stop, put a stop to it and say, okay, did I ask this person this question? Or is this just something that I'm telling them that they need to do? I'm trying to tell them to think this way or tell them to communicate this way. And another thing too is understanding that what you view as valuable is not valuable to every client. And I was dealing with a new agent at the Tampa lock-in who I heard him on the phone. He was trying to tell, it was this older guy that he was on the phone with, was trying to tell this older guy that he needed to do permanent coverage because he was older and he had a term that was going to expire. So the client was like, well, no, I don't want to do whole life. It's overpriced. And so the agent goes, well, no, you should do whole life. Why wouldn't you want to do whole life? And tries to like convince him to do whole life. And the guy was like, no, like I just want to do term. And I was like, dude, no, you can't argue with the client. Just because like I think one thing is valuable, like a lot of times we fall in love with cash back or living benefits or like permanent coverage. But if the client doesn't value it, like don't talk about it. Like just don't talk about it. Because if they don't value it, if you start talking about what they don't value, they're going to tune you out. They stop listening. And then once you get to the part that they actually would value, they're already not listening. So for instance, Joe, when I'm trying to sell younger people, I say, like I literally say, hey, Joe, I know you're not concerned too much about what happens with the home if you die, but do you know what happens? Do you know who you want the home to go to when you pass away? And that's a question I asked to gauge, does Joe care about the house? And if he says yes, oh yeah, I want it to go to my little brother, or then yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit. But most of the time they're just like, oh, no, I don't know, parents. So I'm like, yeah, dude, I know. People don't get mortgage protection to pay off the home when they die. That's kind of what life insurance is for now. It's nice that it will do that, but that's not why people get mortgage protection anyway. And then I'm redirecting them to the things they care about. So what I used to do, as I would talk about that death benefit for 3 to 5 minutes. Like, hey, it pays out tax-free. The coverage goes with you. It always pays out $300,000 no matter what. You can use the money however you need to. And because I said death benefit and then listed all those things, they associated all those things with the death benefit. And young people would start tuning me out. And I was like, well, why don't they care about the living benefits? Why don't they care about the cash back? It's because I spent 5 minutes talking about something they didn't care about. and they stop listening. So with young people, hey, Joe, I know you don't care what happens to the home if you die. It'll pay off the home if you die, but that's not why people get mortgage protection. Here's what the mortgage protection is actually going to do for you. And then speaking to what's valuable to the client. But you have to ask good questions so you know. So back to that agent. So once the agent got off the phone, I was like, bro, if they just want term, just get them term. Like just because you don't feel something's valuable doesn't mean it's not valuable to the client. Like Joe, there's things that you spend money on that I'm like, why would Joe spend money on that? And there's things that I spend money on that you're like, why would Ryan spend money on that? We don't have to understand each other. What I do need to understand if I'm wanting to connect with you, Joe, is what does Joe value? Let me speak to what Joe, I see all the golf jokes going in the chat now. So what does Joe value? Let me speak to that. I had one of my sales when I was at the Tampa lock-in was a little over 5,000 AP. And this guy was, he was looking for term coverage. And so I start showing him term with living benefits, and he goes, well, how about decreasing term? And I was like, well, Joe, I was like, we can do a decreasing term, but most of the time, you end up way overpaying because the coverage decreases as you go. And he goes, yeah, I know, that's what I want. And I was like, okay, cool. So I didn't say anything else. Like one time you can try. If not, that's fine. Get them what they want as long as they qualify for it. And I showed him what he wanted, $5,000. And it was like a 20-minute phone call. That was it. And that's because I was asking enough questions. I was talking to him enough to actually know what he values. So you have to find out what the client values. Now, the mistake that a lot of us make, Joe, is a lot of us ask those leading questions.
Yeah.
So we'll say, hey, Joe, you want to make sure if you die, the home's paid off for your wife and kid, right? And you make them respond just one way. And that's a sales tactic. People know what you're going to do. Like if you were growing up, if you have any siblings, when your siblings try to tell you or get you to do something, you're just like, no, I'm going to do the exact opposite. Guys, adults are the exact same way. If I'm trying to get Joe to say something, Joe's going to go out of his way to not say it. You'll have heard you'll ask a leading question to somebody and they'll give you the dumbest answer. And you're like, why would they give me that answer? This person is so stupid. No, it's because you're trying to tell them what to do, so they're doing the opposite. They're not stupid. They're actually really, really smart. They know what you're doing. They're smarter than you. They know what you're doing, and they're doing the opposite. And you're sitting there like, oh, this person's stupid. No, you're the one who's being stupid. So ask them a genuine question, right? And that you can't ask the leading questions because it doesn't mean anything because it's you that's giving them the answer. So make sure you ask them questions in the ways that, allows them to answer. Does that make sense?
Makes complete sense. This is
yeah.
This is fire. You're dropping bombs, dude. This is deep in sales psychology, and a lot of people on this call need this. So keep it rocking.
All right, bet. So let's go back. Let's go a little over to because obviously when are we done? 4 o'clock or a little bit earlier?
You got 15 minutes.
We got 15 minutes. So we're gonna move over to the objection handling, and then we're gonna talk about closing. So guys, objection handling, we all think about it as handling the objection after it comes up. Joe, do the best salespeople get objections?
Not a ton.
Not a ton, right? That's the answer. Yes, the best salespeople get some objections, but the objections that new agents get, sometimes, bro, I'll be working with new agents and they'll tell me an objection that they got, and I'm like, how in the world did they give you this objection? Well, it's because you're not pulling out objections, you're not controlling the conversation in the first place, right? So you have to pull all the objections out before the client does. If the client brings an objection up, it's an objection. If you bring an objection up and educate them on why that's not sufficient for for what they're doing right now, then it's education and you're on their side, you're helping them understand. So for instance, at the end, if I close and then Joe, you say, if I'm like, hey Joe, which option do you want? And then you're like, oh, well, I think I have short and long-term disability through work. And then I try to explain, hey, it only pays out X amount. It's not even covering your mortgage and it'll only be for like 6 or 7 months. That's it. Well, it doesn't matter because I already showed numbers. Once you show numbers, you have zero power.
Game over.
None. Game over. Like you cannot, anything you say at that point is just a salesperson trying to convince them to buy. And that's like actually what it is. And the client views it like a lot more like that, a lot more strongly. So you have to do all the work beforehand. So when you're pulling out objections, I think it's important to talk about like other life insurance, right? What we used to do, Joe, is we used to like try to get people to get their policies out, rip their policy apart in front of them, and then proceed to sell them mortgage protection. And it worked okay when we were in person because we were right there and we could show them about their policy.
Yep.
And that doesn't work when we're virtual. And it didn't actually work as well as some other tactics would have if we were in person. So what I learned from Rob Richmond, who is one of the best, like probably the best mortgage protection salesperson I've ever heard, probably the best mortgage protection trainer. And I've like tried to embody a lot of the stuff that he does or trained on. He said one time, if you tear down your client's position, they're going to be in a state of defense against you if you're attacking them. However, if you're helping strengthen their position, they're going to view you as an ally. Same thing, guys, just so you know, this is just like a general thing. If you're arguing with your spouse, don't argue with them, help them build their argument, and then they're actually going to listen to you when you are actually like stating your argument. So a little tip there for everybody, sales applies to every aspect of life. But so if somebody has life insurance, I'm not immediately like, yeah, don't tell Anna. I'm not immediately like, hey, well, life insurance is good for mortgage protection because of ABC, or, oh, you have this kind of policy, this is bad. I want to be positive about it. So if Joe says, if I ask Joe, hey, Joe, how much life insurance do you have? And Joe's like, oh, $500,000. I'm like, oh, perfect, cool. I'm super glad that you got that, Joe. Most 30-something-year-olds, like, they haven't thought about getting that. About how long have you had it? And I'm positive on it. I'm saying, Joe, I'm glad that you have that. Like, it's really good. How long have you had that? Whereas if I'm like, oh, well, Joe, how long have you had that? He's gonna, if he hears that tone and he hears me attacking his position, he's not gonna want to tell me. A lot of you guys that people don't tell you how much coverage they have, it's because of your tone and it's because you're not being positive about the fact that they have something already in the first place. So be positive. Perfect, Joe. I'm super glad that you got that. About how long have you had it, and then how much do you pay a month, and then I just say, and then you're spending it. Okay, cool. I'm assuming you got that to help replace your income when you died, right? They're like, yeah, okay. One big mistake, Joe, is a lot of new agents, once they hear about life insurance, because we think, okay, they need to know life insurance is mortgage protection. We're going to get them living benefits. So we say, oh, well, you don't want to use your life insurance for mortgage protection, Joe, because it doesn't have living benefits. And what you're doing is you're giving the client the idea that they can indeed use their life insurance for mortgage protection. So you're sowing the seed of an objection with the client. And so if the client's not already thinking, I could use my life insurance for mortgage protection, don't give them that idea. So just spend it. Don't say anything about it. Hey guys, if you try to get everybody to cancel their policies, I tell people most of the time, like ask my agents, most of the time, like I tell people, Joe, that's a great policy. Please don't ever let anybody tell you to try to cancel that because you're not going to get that price nowadays. And what that does is that builds so much trust and credibility because they expect me to try to replace that or get some extra money out of them. But when I say, Joe, you're in a great position, don't let anybody take you out of it. They're like, oh, okay, good. Like he's looking out for me. And then when I actually have something that I do need to handle, then they're actually going to listen versus being turned off. Like, who are they going to trust? The agent that they've dealt with for the last 20 years or the guy who just called them yesterday and is making snarky comments about their life insurance? Like, it's not you. It's the person they've been working with for a long time. So how you deal with those objections and come at them is extremely important. You need to be positive on their side. Every once in a while, you will run into a situation where you do have to like actually take their life insurance, deconstruct it, and you may have to replace that policy. I think, Joe, it's a lot healthier though to not focus on policy replacements and try to add coverage. I've seen enough people get denied death benefits and things after in the 2-year contestability period to where like that's the last thing I want to do to somebody is have them restart a 2-year contestability period. If it's just decent coverage, like I'm leaving it. And if they want to cancel, they can cancel it, but I'm not going to be the reason they do. I ran into that enough.
Ryan, let me just say, we need everybody to handle that situation the way that you're describing. It's never, ever the right thing to put your client in a worse position than when you got there, ever. So thank you, Ryan. Keep going.
Yeah. The other thing that I will say, guys, something that's important to understand, because we are like sort of a one-stop shop for life insurance, a lot of us think, okay, we have to put this client in the best position for the rest of their life. That's not the case. The average, Joe, do you know how many times the average individual in the United States buys life insurance throughout their life?
I actually don't know. What's the answer?
The answer is 8.
Wow.
8 times throughout their life. So you're not going to be the last person who gets them to buy their life insurance. So a lot of times what we do is we try to fix all of their problems for the rest of their life. And what you're doing when you're fixing problems that they're not looking to fix, you're muddying the waters and you're confusing the client. Confused people don't buy. So you don't have to try to fix their problems for the rest of your job is to put them in a better position than when you found them. And Joe, if that means strengthening their position, making them fall in love with the insurance guy that they already have, the insurance policy they already have, that's fine. Leave them in a better position. Sometimes that means getting them a different policy. Sometimes it means helping them get rid of a policy, but the attitude and mentality always, I need to leave this person in a better position than I found them. And that doesn't mean you have to get them the perfect coverage that will, cover all their needs. Because most of the time that we're selling mortgage protection, if you're trying to fix all their problems, they're like, whoa, like they came into the candy shop to buy a lollipop and you're trying to sell them the whole candy factory. Like, that's not what they're looking for. And now, they're going to be confused. Like, oh, is this really what I want to do? Like, this seems really big, like a really big decision. So fix the problem, the problem that needs to be fixed, have that mentality. But let's talk a little bit more about objections, pulling out the objections. Let's see here. I have so much stuff that I wrote down, notes that I wanted to get to.
Brian, don't
Yes,
kill
sir.
yourself. I'll have you back on in 2 weeks to
right.
cover the rest.
Okay. Let me just talk about closing then. So guys, when you close, when I first started out, I was struggling to close. In fact, I didn't close anybody for 2.5 weeks. And I got lots of presentations and I just didn't close anyone. Working with new agents, like almost every new agent has the problem of talking too much. The tendency when you're not confident is to overtalk. The tendency when you're not confident is to overtalk. Sorry, I was trying to be him. So the tendency is to overtalk when you're not confident, but overtalking does not sound confident. If you guys think about, listen to, he's the guy that talks the most, right? So if you're talking the most, that is a problem. But when you close and you say, hey, which option do you want to pick? And they pick an option. Don't then immediately go into, okay, the premium's going to draft in 3 days. They're going to send you the policy in 2 weeks. We're going to fill out the application. I'm going to need your social, your bank account. We're going to submit the request. We'll find out if we get approved. They give you the name of the carrier, the policy number. Don't immediately do everything to try to wrap the sale up at that point. Like, the sale's not done. Like, you did not make the sale. The sale's not done until the client's actually approved. So when they say, yes, I want that option, perfect. Grab your ID and a check. I like them to have some buy-in. I say grab your ID and a check so I know they actually want the coverage. But I say, perfect, grab your ID and a check. I'll get this started. And then I just start doing the application. I've heard so many new agents lose sales because you bring up a ton of stuff right then, and then they start asking a bunch of questions. The first one comes out like tomorrow. Like, I don't know if I want to do that. And it doesn't mean that they don't want it. It just means you're giving them too much information, and it's information overload in that moment. So it's not that I'm not saying, hey, the premium's going to draft in 3 to 5 days, or I'm not hiding any info. I'm just going to spread it out throughout the application as I'm doing the application. So once you close, you don't talk. The first person to talk loses. There was a day where I was training a bunch of people from Mo Follows group, and they listened to me close several sales, and that's about how every one of them went. I would close. I would shut up. They would talk for a few minutes. They would say, hey, do you have to make a decision today? I would say, yep. And then they'd be like, all right, we want that one. And I was like, all right, cool, grab your ID. And they were like throwing in the check like, oh, wow, Ryan can really talk, but he can shut up a lot better. But like, the reality is you have to get really good at that awkwardness and that uncomfortable spaces, like, and just being silent and letting them talk. The reason that's important, Joe, the tendency, Joe, when a person starts, like when we close and they start saying, hey, we want to think about this, the tendency is to immediately interject and try to get them to make a decision. But the first thing that they say is never the real objection. Never. It never is. The second thing they say is rarely the real objection. It's typically the third thing that they say. So what I learned, Joe, throughout the 2.5 years is when I started interjecting at the first thing they said after I closed, it wasn't the actual problem, and then I wouldn't get the sale. So what I learned was the beauty of just not talking. They're like, it usually happens in 2 to 3 stages where they're like, well, we kind of want to take some time to think about this. And then I don't say anything, and they feel awkward. It's like a comedy bit, right? Where in comedy movies, where when nobody's talking, that person gets really awkward and shares too much information. That's not just a comedy bit; like that's a real thing that happens. They'll start sharing things that they didn't want to share. So like, oh well, I just need to think about this, and then they're like, yeah. I mean, we just kind of need to go over the budget. And then it's like, we already have some life insurance through work, so I don't really know if we need this. Boom, that's it. That's the one. So, and if you start doing that, like you'll start to hear clients exposing themselves and telling you what the real objection actually is, and then you deal with that. So, and you'll be able to tell when it's a final statement because they typically don't have that like period at the end of their sentences where they're saying, hey, we just need to think about it. Normally like, well, we just need to think about it. And you can tell it's not quite done. And they're like, yeah, I mean, we kind of need to go over the budget. And then you can tell it's not quite done. And then they're like, yeah, so, we got some short and long-term disability. I don't really think we need this. And then when you hear that punctuation at the end, then you know that that's your cue to deal with just the last thing they said, because that's the real objection. And then you'll actually be able to overcome some objections, because otherwise, if you talk the first time or the second time, you're not talking about what the real objection is. Does that make sense?
Makes complete sense.
Yeah.
By the way, Brian, it's obvious. Some people read a sales book and then try and teach what they learn in a sales book. Some people have closed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of deals, and they're speaking from experience, and that's what we're getting right now. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. That's everything that I kind of wanted to cover. If there are some questions in the chat, or Joe, there's anything you want to kind of clear up on.
Yeah, I got a quick question, Ryan. It's Mauricio.
Yeah, what's up, brother?
Okay, so that third objection, when they give you that third one, what do you say after that? Like, you just overcome it right there? What if they give you like 2 or 3 things at the end?
Well, it depends. It depends on what that third one is. Like, whatever they say, I'll deal with it. Like, if it's whatever objection they're giving me, I will deal with that specific objection. Okay. So it just kind of depends on what they say.
Okay, cool.
All right, guys, I want to do the drawing for some free leads. Brad, you on here?
Yes, sir.
All right, share your screen. You got all the names loaded up in this?
Yeah, we are ready to rock and roll. Here we go.
By the way, the winner doesn't just get 25 fresh digital mortgage leads. They also get an hour of one-on-one training with the GOAT, Brian Koske himself. So, all right, dude, spin this sucker. Let's see who's going to win some leads. Christian Reyes, you on? Is Christian still here?
I identify as Christian.
Give it another spin.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hey, Christian, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
What's up, man? Congratulations.
You know what's crazy?
What's that?
I just kept saying my name over and over.
Whatever you did worked, bro.
Yeah, that is wild.
Let me give you some instructions here, all right? Give me a second.
Yeah.
I want to get this right. Email info@strongpointdigital.com for your leads. info@strongpointdigital.com.
Give me one second.
They'll get you 25 leads this week, and then get with Koske to book that one-on-one slot, all right?
Awesome. What is it again? Info what?
info@strongpointdigital.com. Nice work, Christian.
Wow, man. That's amazing. Like, I kept praying for this. I was like, man, I hope I hit it.
Well, dude, I
just kept saying my name.
Today's the day, brother. So, hey,
Oh,
now you
yeah.
gotta work hard, take advantage of it, man. Anytime you get a gift, use that as an opportunity to grow. So,
I sure will. Thank you.
appreciate you. Ryan, bro, absolute clinic today. I appreciate you. By the way, somebody asked a question in the chat. This is one you can answer, Ryan.
Yeah.
When's the new podcast launching?
The new podcast, it's this week or next week, y'all. It is coming. We will have it. It's been, we've got enough recorded to where we're getting them out, could be by the end of the week next week at the very latest, so.
All right, guys, I appreciate y'all hopping in. Hopefully, everybody pulled some strong gold nuggets from this call. I did. I learned some things today. And Ryan, I appreciate you a ton. Thanks for all that you do for Pinnacle. And guys, let's have an amazing week. Let's put our foot on the gas, floor it, and help a ton of clients that need it. Talk to y'all real soon.